Okay, so why can't I see everybody? Let's just hold on. Okay. Let's try to start up over here. You can hear me, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to do a little bit tonight about the mitzvah of Kedoshim Tihyu, which is as you're going to see, it's a really very basic and important inyan that's there. Very, very basic and important inyan that's there in like the Torah in general. So we're going to take some time to hopefully go through on a nice solid level here. And that's like this. The beginning of the second parsha, we have the double parsha again. And the beginning of the second parsha starts off with the mitzvah of Kedoshim Tihyu. You're supposed to be Kedoshim. You're supposed to be a holy people. Ki Kadosh Ani Hashem, because I myself, Hashem, are Kadosh. And there's a very basic machlokas that you probably heard of before between Rashi and the Ramban about the mitzvah of Kedoshim Tihyu. Right, so Rashi brings down. We have on the Marmakomos there. I really just brought the Ramban, because the Ramban also quotes the Rashi. So we're going to start off with the Ramban's citation of Rashi. Hevu prushim and harayos and havera. You should try to distance yourself, separate, stay away from averos, from harayos. And as Rashi points out, shekol makom shatamotzi keder erva atamotzi kedusha. Wherever you see and wherever you find people making gedarim to avoid areas of arayos, so that's already called kedusha. And that's a special thing to avoid arayos and the like, and that's enough to make somebody be deemed a kadosh. And according to Rashi, the way to fulfill the mitzvah of kedoshim tihyu is this idea of prushim and arayos, which the way Rashi explains a geder erva, right, probably doesn't just mean to stay away from the actual isurim themselves, but it means to make exactly Rashi, like Rashi says, gedarim, right, that are going to help a person, stay away from those areas of arayos, extra things on top of the basics that are there. And the Ramban is a very different version of what that actually means. So we're going to focus a lot on the teachings of the Ramban. We're going to learn a big chunk of the Ramban inside, and then I'll hopefully elaborate on I guess we'll go with the message of what the Ramban is all about. So the Ramban writes again. I'm going to take you through a quick tour of the Ramban. I don't think that the correct pshat in Kedoshim Tihyu is just to separate from arayos. And let me explain what that is. So I have over here, we made it in bold, inyan. The idea is, the Ramban says, again, this is very, very pivotal, that Torah is hira be'arayos, b'machalim ha'asurim. We know the Torah asur different kinds of arayos, machalos asuros ve'tira ha'biya ish be'ishto v'yachilas ha'basar v'hayayin. But we know, right, that although arayos are asur, but in normal life, as Rashi says, as the Ramban says, biya between ish ve'ishto, that's totally fine. Machalas asuras are asur, but achilas basar v'yayin, nothing really wrong with in theory. And imkain, the Ramban says, yimtza bal hatayva makam liyos shatuf bezimas ishto avnashav harabos liyos beso v'yayin bezole besar lamo. Says the Ramban, so a person who inherently, as he calls it, as a bal tayva, someone who really is totally drawn after his Gashmias oriented, Olam Hazeh oriented taivas, is able to be totally enveloped and totally immersed in all of the areas that are, we're going to call them like very base in the world. As he says, a person can be, as he calls it, shatuf bezimas ishto. A person can overly focus and get overly indulged in the world of not really a rayos, but in the world of the total indulgence in the Ma'aseh Bia, and a person can be gluttonous in terms of sovei yayin and zolei basar, and a mamash like a pig and an animal when it comes to how much he's eating and the types of foods that he eats. Yadabir kitsono b'chol anavalos, a person might feel free to say whatever he wants to say and even speak in not appropriate kinds of ways. Shelo husker iser zevatorah, because after all, in all the things that we just mentioned, there's no real clear Isser, no real clear pasuk in the Torah that says don't do that and don't say that and don't eat that and all that. V'hine, and this is the famous classic line of the Ramban, Yiya noval rishus haTorah. A person can be a menuval, a person can be a very immoral person, and a person can be a disgusting person. Is probably a better way to translate a novel. Rishus haTorah, but he's all within the rishus, all within a totally heter, a kind of a way inside the Torah. Again, Bershus here has all the different meanings of the word. When he says Bershus HaTorah, it's in the with the permission of the Torah, because the person can take advantage of all the things that inherently are mutter, but just indulge way too much. But he has Bershus. The Torah didn't say it was asur. I'm allowed to do that. Again, it's not a mitzvah to do those things, right? It's also not asur. It's a Rishus, right? Rishus also means in the domain of, right? A person can live a life where he's basically rooted in the Torah and the Torah mitzvahs, but in that domain, in that place that he's made for himself, he can live a life of nevalos. He can be a very, very decrepit and disgusting and quote unquote off kind of a person. Again, we're going to explain afterwards. Let's read quickly. Therefore, the Torah comes after it did answer certain things legamre, very clearly and very particularly. Siva adavar bedavar klali. Then the Torah comes along and gives a klal, a very general principle. Shiniya prushim minha mosaros, that a person should always try to be parush, to separate himself from extras, from indulgences in things that are geared towards this world. The Ramban gives a lot of examples. That we're not going to read all the examples of the Ramban right now. I'm going to trust that you open the Ramban over tonight, Shabbos, and you'll be able to look at all the examples that he gives. They're very easy to read through. And then he continues the Ramban, where he says that there's Ikar Akasar v'kiyotze v'zayas yashini nikiyim tahorim prushim hamon v'nei adam she'meluchlachim melachlechem atzvam v'mosaros u'v'chiurim. So the klal of the mitzvah of Kedoshim Tihyu is to come and say, we're not going to focus on any one particular act or one particular Isser that's there. Don't do the Isurim. But the Torah is coming along and saying, what we want you to do is to be separate from a very interesting word, the Hamon B'nei Adam. I want you to be separate and different than the masses. And the masses, he says, I'm just going to read and translate his words, Malach atzmam b'mosaros v'chirum. The masses, the Ramban says, dirty themselves or soil themselves in mosaros and things that are superfluous, extra indulgences, in a taivas odam hazeh, or other kinds of gross things that are there. And your job of Kedoshim Tihyu is to say, I'm going to be above that. The Ramban very quickly gives two beautiful other examples where he says we find that the Torah a lot of times Davka has a pattern like that. He says where the Torah goes out of its way to give all different kinds of halachos in dinei maminis, and there are very, very clear details, right? You're allowed to do this, not allowed to do that. And then there's a klal that the Torah gives, hasisa, hayashar, v'hatov. You should always do what's yashar, what's straight, what's tov, what's good. There's no particular rules about that, but there's a klal that's there, hasisa, yashar, v'hatov. That's the kind of personality that the Torah wants. So the emes, if you look in the Gemaras in Mitzvah, you'll see next year in that Tezvav, the Gemara has, and very interesting, the Gemara shows actual halachos that get changed from what the Gemara thought the halacha should have been Me'ikar Adin, based on the klal of Asisa v'Hayashav Ratov, because those klalim, right, are not just nice ideas, but they're actual real, dinim that are there. It's just a very, very broad based in terms of what they are. He gives another famous example. The Ramban says, like in Hilchos Shabbos, we find a similar thing, that there are very clear malachos that a person is not allowed to do, a lot of details in Hilchos Shabbos, but yet the Torah has a klal called tishbos, right? It's not just enough to be shomer all the the Hilchos Shabbos that we learn in Mishnah Berurah, but tishbos. The person should be in a state of shvisa throughout Shabbos. There's like we said, a cloud that's there that governs the entire concept. And says the Ramban, the mitzvah of Kedoshim Tihyu is exactly like that. There are a lot of details that are there in the Torah. There are a lot of pratim, there are a lot of mitzvahs, there are a lot of halachos that are out there. And says the Ramban, but the key to the mitzvah of Kedoshim Tihyu is to understand that above and beyond, right, all of the particular dinim that are there, person has to keep all those dinim, you got to do all those things, but then there's a certain overall, what the Ramban seems to be describing as like an outlook or a lifestyle, a certain derech that the Torah, wants from us, that we don't have, particular details with, right? But the idea of this is the life that we want you to live. Kedoshim Tihyu, right? And again, we're gonna explain a lot of the the thoughts as we go along. I just want to quickly, direct your attention to it. This is, more just, mitzad the marimakom. It's a great marimakom. There's an Or Sameach that you have on the sheets over here in the beginning of Hilchos Talmud Torah. The Or Sameach sort of makes this into a like a very wide, sweeping, concept in Torah in general. This idea of, on the one hand, there are details, and on the other hand, there are these much broader things that the Rebbeinu Shalom is looking for from us. And again, that's going to be the thing what we're going to speak about for the most, tonight. So the Or Sameach gives an example in Hilchos Talmud Torah. So he's discussing the idea is that there are basics, right, that a person always has to do. He starts with a very beautiful, I was in the middle of this piece, but for us it's the start, a very beautiful line. He says, Kol mitzvos heim shavim, the pacha shebepechusim, ula Moshe Rabbeinu al Basham. Any mitzvah that's there, a certain common denominator, a certain baseline, that it doesn't matter if you're the lowliest guy in Klal Yisrael or you're Moshe Rabbeinu. Torah achas yalachim ksev. The Torah says there's one Torah, one set of mitzvahs, one set of halachas that are there, and they apply across the boards. And but the Or Sameach goes on and says, but if you look though, even within that, now they're going to become madregos, right? So the Or Sameach's first example is you can be yotzei a lulav and esrog by just moving the esrog. You pick it up in your hand, you did a little thing, you put it down, you're done. It was a 2-second ordeal. Yet the Gemara points out that there was a minhag Yerushalayim, right? The Anshe Yerushalayim used to walk around with the lulav and esrog all day long in their hands. That was an extra kiyam mitzvah. That you're not chayiv to do that, but they walked around doing that, all the time. The Torah, the Or Sameach says, doesn't speak about midos that are there in particular. They're basics. Don't take nakama, right? Nakama and atira, those kinds of things. But at the same time, we understand that nakama and atira, right, are very, very baselines, and no one's allowed to do those things. But that's not going to make you into the chavetz chaim if your entire life all you do is just avoid, doing nakama and doing natira, taking revenge, etc. No, to be a bal midos, a person has to be bal midos tovos. A person has to be much more than that. Now, this is the great line for us. The Or Sameach says the same thing is true when it comes to learning. Technically speaking, you can be fulfilling your chiyuv v'higisa b'yom v'layla. The Gemara Nedarim says, Amenachos, that by reading Kriya Shema in the morning, Kriya Shema at night, you read 3 parashiyos in Chumash, and that's it. It takes you 5 minutes, not even 5. Kriya Shema is whatever it is. On a good day, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute to do Kriya Shema. You said Divrei Torah in the morning, you said Divrei Torah at night, and that's your bare minimum chiyuv, whether or not you're Moshe Rabbeinu, or as he says, you're the pachos sheba pechusim. But we all know, right, that if a person's, goal and aspiration in life is to only learn Kriya Shema in the morning, and at night, and I morning Seder, my night Seder, and that's all I do, maybe for certain Shana Aleph guys in September, and that's called, morning Seder and a night Seder. But if that's going to be our goal, so obviously we're not going to get anywhere. Right? So the Or Sameach says, B'chlal, in the world of Torah, we find that there are very, very specific baselines that are there in terms of this is an absolute chiyuv, this has to be, and then you have the klal about what's really good and what's really expected from us. Now, in light of Kedoshim Tihyu, so we're going to just go back and focus on that idea that the Ramban now is speaking about. we're going to try to avoid being overly critical. This is, after all, a Zoom shiur, and we can't what do you call it, be overly rough on these things. But the truth is, right, if we think through what the Ramban was discussing over here, the idea of a person can become a novel b'reshus haTorah. You can take all the rules, not violate anything, but you can be just like a gross person. You can be like not the kind of a personality that we saw Salanter would have been proud of. You can be very much the antithesis, of the Chavetz Chaim and other big tzaddikim, and it can be very, very not nice and very not pleasant. We always have to keep in mind, right? And this is why Kedoshim Tihyu is such an important inyan, which is, and I think that the main reason I wanted to speak about this now is that a klal like Kedoshim Tihyu is really trying to emphasize to us that we have to make our utmost effort to look into, like, what does the Rebbeinu Shalom actually want from me, right? Not trying to get away with doing the bare minimums, which, as we just pointed out, there's bare minimums to everything, right? And, again, if a person avoids, which is also a madreg, if a person avoids, never eating machalos asuros and never doing a rayos, that's, pretty good if you can, keep all the basic mitzvahs. But in terms of who the personality type that the Torah really wants, right? And how do we make the Rebbeinu Shalom, proud of us and really get what the system of the Torah is, right? So that comes from not remaining always only focused on those details and the particulars, but trying to look at a bigger picture, right? Who am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to become? And not what I'm supposed to be doing with myself, right? Because there are things that if I do this and do that, don't do this, don't do that, I can have the basics that are there, but that's not necessarily the me, right? In terms of who I am and what I'm all about, right? So a lot of, just as an example, a lot of the ideas that the Muslim movement that Rousseau Salanter tried to bring into Klal Yisrael was focusing on that kind of a thought. Don't just get so so focused on the pirtei pratim of the halachos, but look at a bigger picture. Are you a person who's a person of kedusha? How are you living? How are you talking? How are you acting? What are you being considerate of? And so on and so forth. Again, I'm going to give one very current example, then we'll move into some other things. A lot of people, again, I don't know what goes on in your neighborhoods, in particular, but I'm guessing you're part of, what's going on out there in the Jewish world today. But there's been a lot of diyunim back and forth about, should we be, trying to have, closet minyanim and these kinds of things, and then, why can't I get together and stand on, in this guy's backyard or on, here they are, the next place, and some of your neighbors these to become very, very hot, issues that are there. Lanius daiti, right? If a person is going to look at what we're speaking about now, the bigger picture, right? And a person stops and says, is the most important thing in my life, the davening tefillah b'tzibur, or am I really supposed to be concerned about human life and the possible repercussions that, certain things might bring about? Am I supposed to be concerned about the types of chilul Hashem sometimes that end up happening when somehow or another we end up getting targeted for, we're the ones that are making the gatherings and getting together and trying to cut the rules. So a person, if he's focused on a detail, and that's what his whole approach to Yiddishkeit is, so he might say, well, what do you mean? I want to daven mincha d'minyan, I want to answer kedusha. But the person who's living a lifestyle of Kedoshim Tihyu, right, is going to know how to be able to say, no, there are much bigger klalim that are there, that the Torah wants to make sure that I'm going to be found. Again, it doesn't mean you can violate a halacha ever, right? But it's how within the system of what the dinim and what the halachos are that I'm supposed to pull the maximum out of myself to be able to really live a life as is that's not like the Hamon Am, that's not like your average guy out there. It's really much more elevated and much higher, much higher than that. The same thing, right, is definitely true. And again, right now I'm speaking to a select, group of B'nai Torah. So we're going to, really just look at the Ramban Pshuto Kemashma on a very simple level also, right, that's there, is that a lot of things that go on in communities, again, we're not pointing fingers right now at any particular places or whatever it is, but a lot of, times, and again, this is definitely an unfortunate thing. It's not the way it's supposed to be, but in our tzibur, right, it definitely does happen that there is at times an overemphasis on some of the externals, on some of the gashmias, things that are there in neighborhoods where you have every type of variation of cuisine that could ever exist, from out there in the world. But we have to bring into something that has the best hechsherim, this and that, places of entertainment, other things that go on that are not, again, is there anything wrong? This is the idea that I'm bad at. No. Does it have the hechsher of the vat of wherever it is? Yes, 100,000% it does. But we always have to stop, right? And that's why this Parshas Kedoshim is so major for us, to stop and say, but is that what the Torah wants from me, right? Does the Torah want me to be a guy that spends all day long running from this place to that place, and enjoying this type of, again, it doesn't mean that there's not a role and a time where a person can relax and have a good time and enjoy something. But when we speak about what's my lifestyle, right, and how do I want to lead my life? So Kedoshim Tihyu comes along and says, let's be very, very, very careful in terms of what we do with ourselves. Let's think twice about the types of leisure activities we're involved with, the type of vacations we might be going on. Again, people need things, they need outs, they need outlets, and all these kind of things. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be that that there's so much of an emphasis on what do you call it, on the world of galad kosher, everything and anything out there, as much as saying adarabah, there's certain things I can learn how to kick back from a little bit, and live like we said, a lifestyle where I'm definitely not being a novel b'rshus haTorah. My life is not about my gashmias. My life is not about all my indulgences, and it's not all about my chisonius, but it's about values and principles that are really much greater than that. But maybe just give some examples, and not examples, but just some thoughts, and then we can carry on a little bit. I'm not going to read all the marmikomas that we have inside over here. We're going to start with a very interesting ha'ara. So there's a Tosfos in it actually comes up more than once in Shas. The one I printed for you over here is a Tosfos Bava Kama Daf Tzadi Aleph, where the Tosfos has a discussion about a Gemara. The basic Gemara you've heard of before, that a Nazir in some places in Chazal, and there's a machlokas how it exactly learn that the pasuk that Chazal are referring to, but there is a place in the Torah that there seems to indicate that a Nazir is called a chote. A Nazir who took a nether of Naziros is called a chote. And the Gemara has a line: he was siyar atzmo min hayayin. It's a mutter to drink wine, but he became a Nazir, and now he has a tsar from that, being able to drink the wine that other people are allowed to have. Called a chote. Again, without going through the line by line in the Tosfos, the Tosfos here seems to try to figure out under what circumstances is a Nazir a chote. Is it ever a good thing and ever an okay thing? To take on a Naziros. That's the discussion that's there in that Tosfos. Now you could read that Tosfos and ask yourself a little tzarech iyon, which is, but I don't get it. What do you like? Why are we discussing a Nazir being a chote? He was siyar atzmo min hayayin. He was allowed to drink wine. Why'd you take that away from yourself? Right? Why are you causing yourself problems? Lamaisa, that's what Kedoshim Tihyu is. Right? Kedoshim Tihyu says, right, that you're Kadesh atzmecha b'muter. One of the lines is there in the Ramban. There are things that are mutter, but I want you to sanctify yourself, you mekadesh yourself, even in the areas that are totally mutter. So, why is there any discussion trying to figure out, the Nazir being a chote? It's obvious that it's a good thing, because you're being mekayim the mitzvah of Kedoshim Tihyu. The Torah wants you to be kadesh atzmecha b'muter. So interesting, if you look through some of the Rishonim in the different inyanim of a Nazir, right? I'm doing this to make a point. I'm going to use just the Sefer Chinuch as an example, in the weird color font over there. So the Chinuch has a line where he doesn't spell out this question explicitly, but you see that the Rishonim were a little bit bothered by this. So the Chinuch has a line where he says that the reason why you call it chote is because ulai natam and agadar hamuchiyav olav binyan gufa v'nishma. So how do we really know that the Nazir didn't go beyond what was good for his guf and nefesh? Maybe the way he was, he should have, not taken on the Naziras per se. Maybe he took it on for a little bit too long. Maybe that particular thing he shouldn't have done. The Chinuch gives a line called Darkei Hashem Yisharim Tzadikim Yelchubam. There's a very fine tightrope that we have to walk all the time in terms of making sure that we're like always doing the right thing. So going too far and too extreme. There's a Rambam in the Shemona Parakim that writes like this also about a Nazir. It might have been a little bit overboard. So on the Chashash that maybe he was Mitzayer too much and he went too far. So then the Nazir, has to bring at times the Nazir has to bring a korban chatas because he would sear atzma min hayayin. But the Chinuch is saying in theory, if I stayed away and I refrained from some kind of a taiva, some kind of an olam hazeh, that's Kedoshim Tihyu. He brings the Ramban. The Ramban says something fascinating. The Ramban in Chumash, a beautiful Ramban actually. The Ramban says, but this is actually the only place in the Torah that such a model exists, where the Ramban says that the chatas of the Nazir is because the Nazir is now going to go back into his normal life. In other words, if you really became a kadosh, so hold on to that madriga, right? Why is the Nazir 30 days or 40 days and you're going back to do all the regular things? Adarabah, hang on to that madriga. So the chatas is al shem ha'asid, is because the wrong is you're dropping off the darga that you would claim for yourself. Okay? There's a much sharper pshat over here that is suggested in a sefer called the Chavetzeles HaSharon. A beautiful idea. Listen carefully. The whole idea of the Ramban of Kedoshim Tihyu, right, is the davka, and this is like a beautiful perspective, is the davka you mekadesh yourselves in areas that are mutter for me, right? It's mutter. I can do this. Everyone can do that, right? I want to do that, and I'm not going to. Why? Because I want to rise above and elevate it myself and free myself a little bit from my being entrenched and stuck in everything in the world that Olam has it. Okay? Kedoshim Tihyu. A Nazir, right, makes an isser of yayin upon himself. So when the Nazir doesn't drink the yayin, it's because the Nazir is not drinking the yayin mitzad adin. He's making the yayin aser. So to have extra isurim is not called Kedoshim Tihyu, right? And that the Torah says, I gave you enough isurim. That's not your job is not to make isurim upon yourself. Kedoshim Tihyu says, let it be mutter and let it be totally mutter. But you should know as a kadosh that you're not going to do that, right? And the whole maila, the whole madrega of Kedoshim Tihyu, right, is dafka to not have the isurim, that to not have things that I even a neder on myself. I made the neder. I'm making it. It doesn't matter. No. Don't have isurim, right? But look at the things that if I want right now, I could do this. If I want to, do, I'm going to. But, right? Kedoshim Tihyu comes into my mind, into my heart, my neshama, and I say, you know what? I'm going to be higher. I'm not going to pull myself down into that particular area. It's a very, very beautiful, pshat and an outlook. We're not looking for isurim upon ourselves. We're not looking for extras. But the idea is to say, Davka, all the things that are mutter, that I 1,000%, could be osik in, I'm going to come and say, you know what? I Davka want to pick myself up a little bit more and not do something that I very easily and very well, could come along and do. Davka because, right, I want to be able to recognize that my life is about higher, ideals and things, and not just the, not just the, the olam hazeh that everyone else is running after and trying to pursue. I'm going to be different in the way I speak. I'm going to be different in the way I eat, in the way I dress, in the way I act, and so on and so on and so forth. Again, all the things that are mutter are going to stay mutter, but I'm going to know what my own personal madregos of kedusha can be when I elevate myself and pick myself up a little bit higher than that. There's a beautiful ravid. It's a very famous ravid. I don't know if you guys ever heard of something called the Tainus Aravid. Okay. The Tainus Aravid is a fascinating thing. Okay, and we're gonna read about it a little bit over here. In this is actually the second time this week we had this sefer called the. I just want to show you. Hold on. There you go. Okay, the Tainus Aravid is a very interesting act of avodas Hashem that the Ravid speaks about in the Balei Nefesh. Remember the Balei Nefesh from earlier this week about the mitzvah of Gerus, right? Same Ravid, same sefer. So at the very, very end of the sefer, the Ravid says, I want to read inside with you a little bit. It's much beautiful. The Ravid says, "Ani roa hageder hagadol v'hashamar ha'ma'uleh v'derech hatov la'achnas ha'yetzer." I'm going to tell you. He has a lot of really nice terms over here. The best, most tried and proven, advantageous, and great derech to overcome a person's yetzer. He says, "Is hu ra'avon hanefesh me'miyat ha'oseh v'tanugeh b'meichel v'mishteh." So I'm going to tell you to try to minimize the hanos that you're getting from meichel and mishteh. Okay? Listen carefully. Rak sheyehena min hareach hatov v'rechitzas hachamin. You're still supposed to enjoy, again, don't conclude anything strange from this. You're still supposed to enjoy sniffing the things that are good when you sniff them. You're still supposed to enjoy, bathing and again, bathing in hot water is not the same as chilling. They're opposite expressions, but, hanging out, whatever it is. It's a ravim alav that's nice, it's sweet, it's fun. Hamaychal hama'at sheyochal sheyemetukan umetubel yafeh. And the food that you're going to eat should be spiced well and should taste good and be very, very geschmack. Because if that's what you like, go for it. You want to enjoy yourself, okay, with whatever things you're going to have. But la'olam, this is the line, la'olam yaniach ma'at, but leave a little over, mikadeit sarcho, leave a little over than what you thought you needed, and don't be mashlim what your entire table was that you wanted to have over here. Chatzkel Levenstein used to say, he used to do this actually, so Shachar once pointed out, if you looked at Chatzkel's plate, if you had a plate of supper, you leave over a little piece of chicken on the thing, leave over a little bit of rice, leave over a little soda in the cup. Or something that was there. Don't take it all. So the expression is the tainus, the tzom, a fast of the Ravid. You eat, you drink, and later on the Ravid is going to say this is the most difficult thing to do, right? And it's better than all the tinios that a person could ever keep. To say I'm going to enjoy, and as he writes, make the food exactly like everything you love, right? But don't have the last piece of steak. Don't have the last, something that's there. And that's a very big, avoda to be able to say, I'm going to hold off and stop. He learned Pshat in the Gemara. Not all the Rishonim learn the Gemara like this, but he learned Pshat in the Gemara in Gittin. Suda shanascha meshor yadecha mimena. A suda that you're enjoying, pull back a little from. Right? Don't have the entire thing. The Ravid says, I think there's two benefits that a person gets from that. Number one, he says, is that you'll be eating more healthily. You're not going to stuff and pig out and all that. Fine. The Ravid says, but the bigger thing, the Ravid says, the idea that a person can learn how to control himself. Shivron ha-taiva, how to break his taiva. Someone once asked Rav Shach, a very great story. Someone asked Rav Shach once, I think I remember I told you when we were in Bnei Brak, that Rav Shach was lived way over 100 years. And he spanned, a period where all the greatest giants of the Gedolei Yisrael and the Rosh Yeshivas, he met, he learned what he saw. And he was chock full of stories and things. And he met everybody. So someone asked Rav Shach, of all the Gedolim that you ever met, who was the biggest Gadol? Who was the most special person? And Rav Shach, without blinking an eye, she said, Rav Chatzkel Levenstein. They were contemporaries. So someone like Rav Shach, he knew the Chavetz Chaim, he knew Mrs. Zalman, who knows, everybody like that. Like Rav Chatzkel was a big tzaddik. Why was he the greatest person ever met? And Rav Shach said a very sharp answer. He said, because Rav Chatzkel never did what he wanted to do. Hear the line? Because whatever he wanted to do, he didn't do it all the way. He wanted that for supper, so I ate, but I didn't finish it. Right? And to be able to live your life where you're always pulling back a little bit, that's the big thing that's there. The Rebbe writes, I'm not going to read all the words in green over here, but how significant such a, what's called the tainus arrival is all about. It's called the tainus because there's a little bit that you're not eating, right? But it's dafka in the midst of my life and all them. I'll tell you a funny story. You know what, Rabbi Marcus, from the Mishmar Yeshiva, my son-in-law. So he has a brother he learned in Panovich for many years. So his brother Dov once told me, he's a great, a really fun guy, his brother. So he said he once, when he was in Panovich, so he wanted to, to try to do this, this Tainus Arriva thing. He was going to work on doing that. Now this might sound a little strange, but there is actually like a thing in this country, do you ever see like a hummus machine? Okay, like the French fry, like those like cardboard little things that have French fries in them, right? So they have in Eretz Yisrael, you put the money in the machine, you press the button, and a little cardboard cup comes out, and they fill it with like chickpeas, with hummus, like real hummus, like that. You eat a snack on the hummus. So he said he was learning, and on nights there was a hummus machine, so he went to buy hummus from the thing. You fill up nice something, and munching when he was going to do the tainus arrival, not eat the end of the thing. So I said, I was like enjoying eating like this, when you're learning. So like all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, I finished like the whole cup of hummus. I messed up the tainus. So I went back to the machine. I bought a second one, and I started eating, whatever. I was waiting till like whatever, finish that one also. The third one, the fifth one, I realized, oh my gosh, like this thing is not for me. This is actually hard to do, but but obviously, the irony and the humor in that is that like eating 5 extra things of hummus just so I can save, over one hummus bowl at the end is not exactly what the Rebbe had in mind. But the idea, right, that we're speaking about is a person being able to say to himself, I'm in control, right? And my guf and my gashmias are not everything and everything that I have in my life. I can decide to do what I want to do when I want to do it, right? And if I decide right now I'm not going to do that, that's going to be fine also, because my mind, my neshama, those are the things that are really in charge of me. And the more and more a person realizes that, right? So then the more he stops and says that whole concept of kadesh atzmecha b'muterlach, trying to find ways to makadesh ourselves in areas that are mutter, but not to go like all the way with certain things, right? And not to live a life and a lifestyle that's again, it's very hard to put your finger on it at times, but that really is counter, to what the Torah Kedosha, is looking, from us. Again, without being myrich about, too many things, we've probably, seen, heard about, in areas of dress, let's say, where certain people might, maybe there's a little bit, more for our seminary sisters than other things, but we might technically dress like within a standard that, everything covers all the right things, and there's nothing, technically everything is fine, but there's a certain surah, a certain style that, like, when you look at it, you say that is like totally not tzedakah. That can't be what the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted, from a person. I don't know if I told you a story, but remember once I was standing in line, in the before the security thing in Kennedy Airport. And somewhere in front of me there was a frum couple on the what you would call the yeshiva side of things, but what I would call like the Brooklyn yeshiva side, which means like they're bakoshi frum, but they have like a certain look and whatever it is. And the bottom line is the woman that was a pasha looked like an absolute zona, and there was everything was totally sneakistic. There was nothing wrong with, again, quote unquote, nothing wrong with every sif and shulchan aruch might have been met, but there was something that was like really, really, really off. And what was crazy and Marsh said was that I was listening to people online. Okay, I could like how bad this was. Listening to people online pointing at this person and saying, "Oh my gosh, look at that! What that?" And someone eventually made the comment that I was dreading was gonna be said. So about like mamish goyim, were commenting. Someone would come, "Oh my God, that looks like an Orthodox Jew," and like how could someone be like And mamish wanted to crawl. There's nowhere to crawl under, but like, it was such a sayed kind of a thing. And of course that's an example of you're messing up this Ramban like in a very, very big way, right? Keeping the rules, but not keeping the feel and the spirit and what is it the Rebbeinu Shalom actually want from me is something that that's a very, very big and important challenge for us to have. And what, of course, is challenging, and with this I'm going to close, is as the Ramban himself points out over here, there are no rules about that. No one can actually give you in a couple of paragraphs or in a couple of sifim and Shulchan Aruch, this is what you have to do to fulfill that big principle of Kedoshim Tihyu, right? It's a matter of getting like a feel, an understanding, learning a lot of hashkafas, learning a lot of machshava, trying to figure out what is it Taka really all about, and then a person is going to be able to say, oh, so if I chap like the goal and what the Rebbeinu Shalom is looking for, now I can try to find those ways, to exhibit this kaddish atzmacha. B'mutter, take the things like we were talking about before when we said the Nazir, right? Not to make isurim, but to live all the things that are totally mutter, like the Rav himself says, enjoy the food you're going to have and make it all, everything exactly like you want. But, right, understand where that line is, where you say, you know what, I'm not going to be totally immersed in everything and anything that technically might be mutter. So that's a little bit that's there, and hopefully, as we're growing, this is not the kind of a mitzvah that you just decide, no, okay, I'm going to try to be makbid on Kedoshim Tihyu from tomorrow. You can wake up tomorrow morning and say Kriya Shema Bisman. You can even start doing the Magen Avraham Bisman, or etc. There are certain things that are much easier to say, I'm going to do this. This is not like that, right? Kedoshim Tihyu is a whole process of a person living his life and trying to really get into the feel, into the understanding, the mindset, the kishkas of the kind of personality that the Torah would want, and work hard on that, and also realize that a lot of people are not into that, and a lot of people are not doing that, even right around us in our beautiful, own, communities. But that's the reason why it's called Kedusha, and that's the reason why it's called an elevated kind of a lifestyle, is dafka because it's not, for the masses, and it's not what everyone's doing. But Amir Tashem, for our, chevra over here, all the young greats that we have sitting around the room, we'll be able to take steps to really try to get that kind of a feel, to get the kind of an approach, trying to be, above and beyond, all the masses, and above and beyond, the basics that the Torah wants, and really be able to be zocha to that kind of kedusha. So that's the vad for tonight, something to think about, and we'll move on next time. Now, I'm going to send out a message on I guess on the chat, Misama,